Well, more now on that growing crisis in Ukraine. Arash Aramesh is a national security analyst at Stanford Law School and joins me now from Washington. Nice to see you again there, Arash. Very quickly, a lot of people are talking about Ukraine's nuclear assets. Should these be put into the equation?
Well, gladly, Ukraine gave up most and all of its nuclear weapons, actually, in the early 90s after the collapse of the Soviet Union with American leadership, Kazakhstan, Belarus, and Ukraine gave up their weapons. A lot of these weapons actually went back to the Russian Federation and were destroyed. That's one thing. But what's really important here is to make sure that, with Western support and American leadership, that Ukraine's sovereignty is respected, and B, we see no more of these acts of aggression coming from the Kremlin, especially from the person of President Putin, who is certainly capitalizing on this perceived weakness in the West.
OK, so are we saying now that Mr. Putin wants Crimea back? You know, it was gifted to Ukraine 60 years ago. Do they want it back?
What Mr. Putin wants back is a much bigger role in global affairs. He has very infamously said that the greatest tragedy of the 20th century was the collapse of the Soviet Union. He really wants to go back to those glorious days when the Russian Federation, and the Soviet Union ran an empire. Whether he wants Crimea back or not, I think he's mainly playing to his domestic audience. But in terms of national security, regional and international security, Mr. Putin's first move in Crimea is an indicator of his much bigger ambitions in Syria, in Iran, in the Persian Gulf, in Asia, and around the globe.
But do you think that any of these international leaders that are watching this really believe that he will take it further?
Well, if a man is willing to put 15,000 troops in Crimea, you got to believe that he's willing to do certain things. Remember, not every world actor is logical. We said that, some world leaders were rational. They all think about their national interests. What is important to Putin and his United Russia Party right now? It's important for them to bring back the glories of Russia, to be able to give back to the Russian people what they think they have lost in the 1990s during the democratization and moving away from doing that democratization process. So we got to see what happens. But what's important right now is, first of all, we got to de-escalate. We got to make sure that the situation doesn't turn into a real hot war. But at the same time, the fact that Mr. Putin and his allies around the world and people like him can think that they can get away with acts like this shows that we've done something wrong on our end in the West.
OK, many people are comparing this situation with what happened in the Second World War. They're saying that Europe blinked and did nothing, and by the time they did, after warnings about Hitler, it was too late. Do you think this is another situation that's developing here with Mr. Obama saying that we're not going to do anything apart from sanctions at the moment?
It always makes me uncomfortable when I hear World War II comparisons, especially people being compared to Hitler. Well, Hitler was Hitler. But what's important is to make sure that Putin is not going to walk all over our president and also Western European leaders to get what he wants with force. I don't think that anybody could be like Hitler. We haven't had a Hitler since 1942, 1945, after his demise. But Mr. Putin has shown much grander, much bigger ambitions than just the president of the Russian Federation. And he has shown willingness to challenge the Western order led by the United States and the norms and the norms of the international order. He's willing to challenge them. He's willing to bend the rules. And now he's shown that he's going to break them if he gets away with them.
Very quickly, Arash, do we really want the US and Europe to go further?
We want to make sure that this does not, in fact, turn into a hot war. But we have tools and we have ways through which we can put enormous amounts of pressure on Russia and Russia's allies. If we decide to do that, though, we got to be careful, because Russia can also give us a lot of headache with Iranian nuclear negotiations, in Syrian peace talks, and around the world. But here's the thing: just because someone is going to cause you headache doesn't mean that right now we should let ourselves be bullied and not stand up for what is absolutely right and what is in the long-term interest of global security.
Arash, always a pleasure. Thank you.
Good to be here.